So, under IDA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, it is a requirement that every state has to have a parent and information training center, and we happen to be the one for Connecticut. Now, for much larger states like New York, California, Texas, and Florida, there are several PTIs or Parent Training Information Centers, and they are not called CPAC. We are called CPAC, so they may have different names. We are a statewide nonprofit organization that offers free information and support related to special education to parents as well as professionals, education professionals. All of our programs are completely free, and all of our staff either are parents of a child with a disability or have a disability ourselves. So these are our funders. We receive funding from a variety of sources. The PTI grant through the U.S. Department of Education provides us some inroads into other grants. So we have the Down Syndrome Association of Connecticut Act, which are some of our funders, the statewide Connecticut statewide Family Engagement Center, the Early Childhood Office of Early Childhood, and Connecticut State Department of Education. So our vision is that our families will have the confidence and knowledge and understand what they need to effectively advocate for their children. And we partner with the professionals to ensure that children and youth grow and learn to their full potential. The mission for Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center is to educate, support, and empower Connecticut's diverse families of children and youth with disabilities or chronic condition from birth all the way through age of 26, and we support the professionals who serve them. So I'm very excited today to have Melissa Allers and Bill Grimm today to have our discussion today. I'll let them introduce ourselves. So I do work, Melissa is part of the Language Access Work Group, and I'm excited to have you here, Melissa. And I'll
Thank
bring it over to
you.
you.
Thank you. Well, no, here I am saying good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So again, I'm Melissa Allers. I am the Trade Development and World Languages Coordinator here for ACES. Just a little bit of information about ACES, and Bill can certainly step in as well. So ACES is one of the six Regional Education Service Centers, or RESCs, in Connecticut. We oversee and provide services to the greater New Haven, South Central area, where we have magnet schools, specialized schools, as well as many different, programs and services. Specifically, I am under ACES International, and my program is working with youth and supporting them in looking for an alternative pathway to college through trade development, through a trade development program initiative. And the other position that I hold here is our World Language Services Coordinator, where we provide educational interpretation, translation, bilingual evaluations, language access support for schools, as well as a few other things that we're working on right now. And I've been with ACES since 2013 in the Open Choice Program, and I moved over to International just recently. And I also am the co-chair for our diversity committee here. Bill?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Grimm. Melissa did a great job just kind of sharing ACES information and what we're all about. I was a middle school math teacher for a few years, and then had been a school administrator for 22 years in 3 different districts here in Connecticut. And I joined ACES in the summer of 2021 as Director of Talent Development. And so, kind of some of my main activities are I serve as a teacher leadership coach. I work with our ACES employees on educational and career pathways, collaborate with all our different schools and programs to identify and provide professional learning opportunities around specific topics that they may be interested in or challenged with and that sort of thing. So it's nice to be with you this afternoon, and I'm going to launch a slideshow presentation, so hopefully we'll be able to see it and get started. All right. Can we see that?
We sure can.
All right. So I'm gonna so as an educator, I always feel the need that it's important that we check in with each other. This is a check-in. On a scale of sheep, how are you feeling? And so you can feel free to um, if you like, you can share in the chat one of the numbers. You can put, fingers up. You can do that sort of thing. But I always think it's important that we check in with each other and just help support each other.
I'm going to share that I'm feeling like a 3 today.
Okay.
We're together, Toby.
I'm trying to
Have
see
it.
where I am.
We have in we have in the chat. We have 2, 1, 1 and 5.
Ones and
So let's
fives. Yep. It's Thursday. It's Thursday. I understand that.
I think I'm a 9, jumping through hoops.
Yeah, so it's interesting because 9 is can be interpreted in different ways, right? It can
hmm
kind of be jumping for joy or jumping off the cliff or that sort of thing. So it's always interesting to have conversations around what each of these might mean to each person. Um, well, I think that it's also important to acknowledge that throughout a school day, we probably cycle through all 9 of these at some point. So I was with a class of pre-service teachers at Sacred Heart on Tuesday night, and just talked about that, with a classroom, you may have multiple check-ins throughout the day just to see where kids are. And to me, the most important one was after recess. So, how are kids doing after recess so that we can get on with the learning during the day? So I shared information about me. Melissa, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share from this.
Thank you, though. Okay. So, um, so how did this all come about? So, as Jovi was stating, I am part of the Language Access and Equity Work Group. So, given recent federal administrative decisions, we were started talking as part of the work group as, what are the best ways that we can support the families in educational systems districts that we work with. And as far as belonging, feeling the sense of belonging within their school communities, specifically for the families of multilingual learners. So our guiding question: how do we cultivate a true sense of belonging for students and families? And throughout this presentation, we'll be talking about those pieces as well as belonging for us, kind of working behind the scenes as part of the staff who support these families. Um, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bill. Yep. Okay. So yep, we will have opportunities for questions at the end, but at any point, if you want to throw something into the chat, we'll be monitoring that as well, or you could just raise your hand and we'll make sure to get to you as soon as we can.
All right. So the journey on this topic, specifically around psychological safety, started for me about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And I was doing some data analysis for mainly our schools and programs, but looking at and asking the question, I wonder why some schools have high staff turnover and high staff absence rates. I wonder what might be contributing factors to improve staff retention and attendance. And so these were kind of the wonderings I was trying to investigate and began to research the characteristics of organizations, so schools, but also business, the business world. And looking for examples of organizations that had lower than average turnover rates and lower than average staff attendance or staff absence rates. And I quickly came across a term and a concept, and kind of a light bulb went off over my head. And so for the past year and a half, I've been kind of tunneling myself down this rabbit hole of this topic and just trying to learn more about it and trying to answer the questions. As for me, as a former school principal, what were the things that helped create a positive environment for the community, and what were some things that maybe jeopardized that? And so, I found that it had a name. That we talk a lot about positive school culture and environment, but there's actually research and theory behind it, and the name is psychological safety. Um, and I don't know if that's a term that you may have heard already and heard before. I hadn't really heard it prior to this in this context, but since I started kind of digging into it a little deeper, I see it everywhere now. So it's just one of those kind of subconscious things that comes about. So ultimately, psychological safety is about creating a culture. It's originated based on employee groups. So it's really an employee group, sort of concept, but creating a culture where employees are encouraged to take risks, share ideas, raise concerns, ask questions, and admit mistakes. And I think if it ended there, we could all say, okay, we have some piece of that there. But the important piece is without fear of consequences or repercussions. So it's that fear that holds people back from taking risks or sharing ideas or raising questions or concerns or admitting mistakes. And this definition of psychological safety comes from Amy Edmondson, who I'll introduce in just a second. And so the term psychological safety actually created back in the 1950s by Carl Rogers, who's a psychologist and psychotherapist. And he was looking at the conditions that were necessary to foster an individual's creativity. And so he looked at three processes that were important in fostering creativity, and that was kind of accepting individuals for their worth unconditionally, providing a climate where there's not much external evaluation, and then just understanding others with empathy. So those three conditions that he looked at. Then in the 1980s, Demings had 14 points of management. So again, business related. And point 8 of his 14 points was drive out fear. And that's so that everyone may work effectively for the company. So that's kind of brought into that try to eliminate fear. And then finally, Amy Edmondson is currently a professor of leadership at Harvard Business School. So again, kind of a business school slant and a business orientation. But she has, since 1999, kind of led the field of research and writing in the areas of psychological safety. So why is it important? And we'll talk, still kind of at a business level and kind of amongst employees and colleagues and things like that. But you hopefully will start to see how this expands to, all of our stakeholders. But so psychological safety, when you foster it and kind of build it up, can increase that team collaboration and trust. You can enhance engagement, morale. We have that sense of belonging there. Just fosters an environment for learning, growth mindsets, drives innovation and creativity, certainly improves employee satisfaction, which has oftentimes a direct result on employee attendance and retention and those sorts of things. And I'll let Melissa talk a little bit more about sense of belonging.
Sure. Okay. So sense of belonging. Yeah. So again, like, I was saying earlier, especially now we're finding families, I mean, I can speak to my experience and, Jovi, I'm sure you may have similar kind of experiences as I do too. Families, especially families that either have limited, English proficiency, and who are trying to work, with their communities, especially their school where their student, attends, um, may not have that feeling, may or may not have that feeling, dependent upon, the level of services that are available to them, to have them feel more supported, to be able to have them feel part of their students, educational journey. And, that ties it directly into psychological safety. I've had families, what if I speak up? Am I going to be in trouble? What, can I say this to an administrator? Oh, what are my rights? So, I think this training is definitely all encompassing, not just for us as staff feeling comfortable and at peace and, safe in our own positions, but it also kind of trickles out to the community as, it's almost humbling to know that we're all, maybe feeling a little bit, worried in these times. So I think, again, with the support of this training, we can learn to feel that psychological safety that, again, we can pass along to the people and the students and the families that we serve.
So you always want to recognize that in communities or environments where there might be low psychological safety, um, these are some of the negative impacts, that there can be, kind of low, stakeholder well-being and morale, stress and burnout. Certainly it can impact staff and student attendance, high turnover of staff, just mistrust, because it kind of gets to the transparency piece, like how clear are we in our communications? How accessible are we to our school community, as educators? That, kind of that low sense of partnership. How do we all work together? And that can be within school teams, or it can be school, home, school, community partnerships. So just kind of that lack of partnership on that we're all kind of pulling in the same direction for our students and our families.
Sure. And with that too, the low sense of belonging can certainly have that domino effect. If we're seeing staff, families not feeling like they belong, not feeling safe within their environments, it could have that effect where attendance might be affected, performance could certainly be affected, and that could lead to multiple outcomes dependent upon the support that is being offered out. So I think it's really important to kind of view this from multiple aspects, not just ourselves, but the effects that it could have on the community, the school community as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also add that, as Melissa said, kind of trying to take the perspective of what does psychological safety and belonging look like from a student's point of view, from a family's point of view, especially multi-language learners, and how welcoming are they made into the school community. And so, I kind of wrote down it's beyond just talking the talk. It's actually walking the walk. We can tell somebody they belong to our community, but it has to be their perspective and their feelings and sense of whether they actually belong. And what are those actual actions and behaviors that we undertake to set up an environment that's welcoming and cultivates that belonging. So, I think for me, it was then shifting the concept of psychological safety from a business management focus into kind of education perspective, and certainly from theory to practice. As a teacher and school administrator, I didn't get bogged down in theory too much. I was more kind of practical and how do we get things done and how do we move forward and how do we build up our communities. So I try not to get too bogged down in the theory, but ask that, so how does this actually relate to school communities? And how can it be used to cultivate a sense of belonging, to foster increased feelings of psychological safety so that people feel part and contributors of the community, to ask questions, to share ideas, to take risks, and sometimes to make mistakes, and not feel like it's going to be held against them in some way.
Okay. So making the shift from the business focus to educational, and from theory to practice. So how does it relate to school communities? Um, in the sense that, so again, within the school community, we're trying to making every effort to have every student, every family that walks through those doors feel like they're part of it. So it's about part of it is about being creative about how, we do that. And with the districts that I've worked with, I've seen definite unique ideas that that are really showing families that a true, genuine effort is being made to have, that incorporation. And I know a lot of factors come into play for different things. Budgeting certainly can be a concern as to what schools and what organizations can be able to provide. And I think that's where that creativity piece can come in, to cultivate that sense of belonging and doing the best, as far as the school can, to be able to reach out to families like Bill was noting earlier. We can feel that we're doing that all that we can, but what's that other side of it? What's the feedback from families as to, okay, is this working? Was this useful to you? um, and utilizing different tools to have appropriate and open, safe conversations as to how families can certainly have that better connection, and having the vulnerability of saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I messed that one up. Can we try that again? Or moving forward, we're going to be doing this.
I want to pause for just a second, and I just checked in the chat, and Renee, I think students are good at expressing it, but it always is interesting who is hearing it or seeing it and taking that action, right? So Renee, do you want to share more, ask more, open up a conversation?
Yeah, sure. I absolutely. I'm hearing from families within my communities and different collaboratives that I sit on, just the lack of feeling safe, not necessarily knowing which teachers that they can have as their go-to person. Feeling like a lot of times it's the adults that are harassing or bullying, or not hearing them, which of course leading to withdrawing and leaving classroom and the poor attendance and all of the things. So a lot of times students are saying what they need, but it's being dismissed, or get over it, or everyone feels like that, or maybe you should have gotten more sleep. Being dismissive instead of, I hear you, how can we get over this together?
Yeah. And it does unfortunately happen for sure. Yeah. Joviana?
I was going to say that I see that connection of how it trickles down, right? That domino effect, right? If we don't have our school personnel, staff feeling like they belong, right? And that they can support and that they're supported when they're supporting others, right? It sort of puts them in a position like my hands are tied, right? I can hear what's going on, but I can't support. And I mean, obviously, this is not the conversation that is happening with this child, but this is what's going on behind the scenes, right? I know we need more staff. I know we need to support, but my hands are tied, right? I can't do anything beyond in what's in my classroom. And if I do try to have this conversation, I am afraid of what those repercussions are, right? Or those consequences are. If I am at a PPT and I want to share some of my concerns, I can't fully share those concerns, right? Because there is that sense of not feeling like you're safe to have those conversations, even within your own um, community of being a staff member or personnel.
Yeah, it's I wish I could say that all educators, and I include everybody in that works in the schools as well as our community partners, um, were in a place where they felt safe to address the concerns of students and families, but also kind of needing to handle their own concerns and questions and that sort of thing. So I would always just I tried to encourage that who with all students, who's the one person in this school that you feel most comfortable sharing a concern with, and use that person as kind of a go-to person. And in some cases it might be the main office staff, it might be the nurse, it might be someone else. Doesn't have to be a classroom teacher or a principal or whoever. So but I used to in my schools, every couple months I would ask that question of students through a little survey. Do you have one person that you feel you can go to, and who is it? And then I would collect those and I would start to look at, for trends and patterns and things like that. And in some case it was the school social worker, in some case it was, the nurse. I'll say in rare cases it was the principal, but it happened from time to time. But so I think there's just ways you can kind of cultivate it. There's actions and actual behaviors and practical things you can do to build up that sense of safety and belonging. So just, kind of I'll talk just briefly, I'll let Melissa then take this, but so what is belonging? It's really, as I said, it's that individual's perception. It's not what we say or to them. It's how do they receive it and how do they feel accepted and included, valued and supported within a community.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So thank you, Bill. So, I know here at ACES, some of the things and actions that we take to have that sense of belonging. And one of them was Bill presenting this to multiple service areas or departments or, programs within our within the agency. So this was an actionable step that we took. And we definitely have other ways that we get the feedback, and I think it's really important to note that, and so this I may be preaching to the choir here too. I can say, oh, you know what, I'm gonna take that off their plate because they seem really busy. It's important to get that feedback, like, oh, you seem busy, how can I help you, versus assuming that what you're doing is going to be helping, which I know it comes from a good place, but that's also part of the feeling safe, because you don't know how that other individual is really kind of thinking, if that action were to take place. So we're taking feedback. If anyone has any would like to discuss how their organization or school um, can or is taking action to have that true sense of belonging within the community. You can put it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute.
So I can certainly provide a little bit of insight. I think our very first all-inclusive event is actually occurring in my district in May. The Adventures in Arts program is kind of like an organization that is going to be we have a lot of parents that are in our PTOs and stuff like that. And so in our elementary school, which is one of the largest in Connecticut, we have about almost 1,200 students. And yeah, it's huge. It's one of the largest in Connecticut. And it's a brand new building. It's about a year or so old. And so they're really trying to cultivate this this absolute, the essence of belonging. And so much so that even our outplay students were invited to participate and give, their artwork to be, displayed in the school at an event. They were given, earlier entrance time to come in, and we have sensory rooms instead of just sensory tables available to them to support their needs. And we involved all of our integrated and smaller setting classrooms to really participate. We included their teachers and emails, and essentially I don't know of another event that our school district has ever had that really has gone so above and beyond to make sure that all of our kids were included from, even pre-K, which is amazing, all the way up to 5th grade. So it was really nice. I think it's been a long time coming, but it's just really interesting to see how much of a wave, it is really like we're kind of turning the corner about creating those, making the room for the questions, like how do we get these kids involved? What do we have to do? How do we have the teachers feel comfortable enough? And sometimes it was just a matter of just providing that education. Well, the general ed teachers are always asked. It is the assumption that because the kids only spend a certain part of the time in those other smaller settings, that perhaps they don't need to be included, when the reality is that we know, working with special education, that it's really day to day, sometimes week to week, that time in that classroom changes. And so that week that you sent out the flyer, it may never have gone home because they spent more time in that separate setting. So to know that they were included in a part of that conversation as teachers, right, as real staff, right, with their own classrooms, and also that all of the students, whether they attend every day to our district or are outplaced and still a part of our community, are all included. So that's just something that I know is in the works and we're a part of. So I just thought I'd mention it, but it's really great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's and when I hear of like events and things like that, I always jump to a concern that I have is, when do you hold them so that families can attend, right? And because that's the challenge for many families is, if they're working on Saturdays, if they're working at night, if they're, those sorts of things. So how can you try to do the best and find out when those opportunities are that you can hold events, or maybe you have to have, over the course of, the art fair is open over the course of a week or something like that, so they can kind of come and go when it's available. So.
Yeah, and actually that's exactly what they did. It's not just one day.
Yeah.
So they, like I said, they really thought of everything, just to, be sure that we're all included, which was really nice. But yeah, it's more than one day. So it was really very nice.
Yeah, that's great. And I also think that, the cultivating that and planning that, it's not through luck, right? It has to be intentional. Some things happen through luck, just forming relationships or whatever it might be, but it can be sustained if there's intentional actions that take place, that to plan and to implement and to follow up on and that sort of thing. So, but so ultimately, really the big questions are what actions or strategies, do we undertake to build a sense of belonging, even when a new staff member joins a school community? And then taking that to the next step, what are those strategies or actions when a new student and their family join a school community, and how do we that kind of bringing them in as in a welcoming way, and providing whatever supports they might need for to get off to a good start and then be successful. So, when we talk about in a school community, we want to cultivate a sense of belonging for everyone. It's not just staff members and community partners, but our students and our families, our local leaders, administrators, everyone. We want everyone to have a sense of belonging when they access our school and its activities. So as I said, I'm not a real theoretical person, so this is the main theory I'll just share from this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's, kind of the famous pyramid. And, love and belonging is right in there, right in the middle, right above, the physiological needs and the safety needs. That sense of belonging and sense of connection is the next, according to Maslow, the next most important thing for that someone needs to be part, and just that sense of connection to someone or some group or some community that they want to have them feel like they belong to that.
Sorry, Bill. So creating a culture belonging, it requires deliberate efforts to foster those connections, whether it be, again, family, staff members, school community members, empathy, and mutual respect among the community members that we're in contact with. All right. So creating psychological safety. So something that is definitely important is establishing and those clear norms, the transparency, the communication, encouraging that communication. And again, we can certainly tell people that it is a safe space, but they need to feel it as well. And ensuring that families, community members do feel that they are supported, um, and sharing those ideas with having the opportunity to have stakeholders share ideas, concerns, feedback, and leaders displaying vulnerability. So a leader in this case can be an administrator, it can be a team leader within the district or within the school, student support leaders. I think that we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form within our positions. Um, actively inviting that feedback, like Bill was talking about with the student surveys that he held, and making sure that we respond to them in a timely manner, because sometimes we complete these forms and say, oh well, they're not going to look at it for a while, but making sure that we do get back to them within a certain time frame, even if you have to set that for yourself, put a reminder in. um, and practicing the behaviors that promote the psychological safety, showing vulnerability within our roles, because we are all human, we are all going to make mistakes, and we're all learning throughout it too.
Yeah,
Bill,
and
did
I'll
you
say
have
that
anything you wanted to add?
the vulnerability is a key foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and modeling vulnerability, just as Melissa said, to say, hey, I don't know everything. I don't have the solution to this problem. Let's talk about it together and brainstorm, and you build ownership of a path forward. But if it's the leader always coming in and saying, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it, that does absolutely nothing for psychological safety.
All right. So some misconceptions about psychological safety, about being nice. So I was kind of a victim of this in elementary school. Oh, well, I'm nice to the teacher, so I'm never going to get in trouble. Or, however I thought about, my elementary, whatever was going on in my elementary mind. Um, but avoiding the conflict and difficult decisions, as it is, certainly can be an uncomfortable situation, just for our safety, kind of stepping back from it. And about even feeling comfortable, because going back to the difficult decisions, you feel comfortable in it, and what feelings, what emotions kind of come about with that. um, Leadership responsibility, that it's only one person's role to establish or to have the psychological safety, to put out different ways, or different communications about feeling safe within the environment. And don't we do this already? Bill, that one is you. You want to take that one?
Yeah, well, no,
I
I
like the way
get
you
that
framed
question a
it.
lot, right? So don't we do this already? Any new initiative or any, res- kind of morning meetings and restorative practices and those sorts of things that I think are really important to building a community. And but sometimes we do this already. I do this already. Show me and don't just tell me, show me that you do it and how do you do it? So but I think it's just, again, it comes back to our responsibility. And even if we do this already, are we all doing it? Do we, how can we do it at scale? How can we improve it? Are we still striving to grow and become a better community for all of our stakeholders? So I'm going to go back to the about being nice. I'm the father of three daughters who have are well past middle school, but they had a lot of nice friends, but sometimes it was fake nice. So I just had to be careful with that. And I don't want to characterize any one group or anything like that, but there was a lot of fake nice going on in middle school. So just have to. It's that when you are psychologically safe, you can be uncomfortable. You feel that you can be uncomfortable in situations and have difficult conversations, and come to some resolution, and negotiate and compromise and those sorts of things, and share ideas and concerns and questions. So it's really about how we approach it, and we're going to start to jump into just some more of the practical ways that we can do that.
Okay. How do I promote psychological safety and specifically a sense of belonging for all members of the school community? So certainly, we can, okay. So certainly we can practice this, within our school communities. I'm sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty here. Um, I'm sorry, could you give me 1 second, please?
Yeah. So I'll jump in. So, there's how do we promote it? We can practice it, we can apply it, we can model it, we can acknowledge the behaviors. And those behaviors, they need to be intentional. We need to do them regularly. We need to do them consciously and with purpose, to build psychological safety for ourselves, our colleagues, our students, our families, our community partners. Um, so there are, practical and behaviors and actions that we can take to build a sense of belonging, but also promote psychological safety. And I see Melissa on my screen. She's, are you okay over there?
I'm okay. I'm sorry about something just like got caught, so I apologize. Thank you, Bill. I apologize for that.
Anything else you wanted to add to this?
No, I couldn't really hear because I was coughing, but I'm sure,
Okay.
you did great. So thank you.
So I want to jump into one model. So there are different models and different, certainly a lot of research around psychological safety and how to promote it. This is one model that I came across, and I'll talk at the end about some of the main resources that I've used to kind of build my interest and kind of continue down this path. But at the beginning, Melissa had mentioned that we engaged as an administrative team in a book study, and it was Amy Edmondson's book, the Fearless Organization, I think is what the name of it was. I have it at the end, but and it was not successful. I will just say that. I had high hopes for it, and we launched it last spring, a busy time of the year, and there were. I'll say it this way: there were different levels of engagement in the book study. So then after that, we kind of engaged in it a little bit more during a summer retreat, and that kind of helped kick off. And then I really focused on those those of my colleagues who were most interested in it, and then started kind of drilling down and presenting it with their staffs and that sort of thing. So you can spend a lot of time trying to do the high level work, and spread the word, and spend a lot of time trying to get everybody engaged and bought in. But for me, it was who's really interested in it, and let's do it there. And then through those experiences, maybe it'll grow, and we can share successes. But so this leader factor is, as I said, one of the models. And it basically says that psychological safety is built at the behavioral level. That it's the behavior of adults, it's the behavior of children, and that we need to practice and model these behaviors every day, and especially where those interactions happen. We have to be kind of on the ground floor of modeling these behaviors and practicing and acknowledging and that sort of thing. So it said four stages of psychological safety. So the leader factor defines the stages as stage 1, inclusion safety. So that's kind of where we'll focus on the practical behaviors that we'll look at. And then stage 2 is learner safety. And that's within a community, do we feel safe to kind of learn and have a growth mindset? Stage 3 is contributor safety. And that's, do we feel that we can contribute? Can we share our ideas? And stage 4 is challenger safety. And that's where we can question others' ideas. We can, kind of have that debate back and forth and brainstorm back and forth. What's the best way to move forward with something? One of the criticisms of this model is that it implies a linear path to psychological safety. And I think it's mainly by how they named it: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. So there were some that said, okay, we have to get really good at stage 1 before we can move on to stage 2 and on. But in practice, the behaviors that are offered at each stage, and in this model, there's like approximately 36 different ideas and behaviors presented at each stage that promote safety for inclusion, for learners, for contributors, for challengers. So I find that the behaviors themselves are interchangeable, that they, from stage 1 up to stage 4, that they all have value and can be done in any order based on need or preference or comfort level with the particular thing. So again, demonstrating these behaviors, practicing, modeling, has to be intentional, has to be with purpose, has to be done regularly to build that psychological safety. So we're going to jump into and share some of from stage 1, the inclusion safety, which really connects well with belonging, and start to look at what are some behaviors, just to give you some ideas. It's not an all-inclusive list, and as you saw, there's a link to the website for Leader Factor that presents this and a lot of other information around psychological safety. So the first one that I chose was introduce yourself at the first opportunity. So it says, you don't assume or expect the new person, whether it's a student, a family, a new staff member, to be the one to make the first move. So go out of your way to introduce yourself to someone who's new, and if you don't know them, and offer support. And then that just kind of, breaking that ice and displaying that warmth is welcome to newcomers into a community. Learn names and how to pronounce them, especially important with the many different cultures we have coming into our schools now, and families, and because nothing is more personal than a name. When we, Joviana and Melissa and I jumped on a little bit before, and my name tag said William, And so she started calling me that. I changed it quickly to Bill because the only time I was called William was by my dad when I was in trouble. So it kind of gave me a little start. But I'll give an example of this. I do work with the teacher residency program and the group up there to try and encourage pathways to teaching. And my first introduction to somebody was the name. I would there were a couple different ways I think I could have pronounced the name. So having kind of getting in deep with psychological safety, I said I'm just going to ask. I'm going to ask, how do they pronounce their name? And they shared it, and I wrote it down kind of phonetically, and then towards the end, I said, thank you, Nurali, for hosting this meeting, and then I asked, did I say that correctly? And so just don't be afraid to just ask, right? And have them repeat it, and can I say it, and can you tell me if I'm saying it correctly, and that sort of thing. So, but that's just a great way to build belonging.
Sorry, I keep going on mute. So physically facing people. So, with respect to some cultures who this may be offensive, facing others, actively engaging, in a conversation. It's demonstrating respect, value, and that sense of belonging. Now, especially if you have a translator interpreter in the room for any type of meeting, please don't speak directly to the translator interpreter. Please speak with the recipient of that interpreted information, the parent, whoever it may be, the community stakeholder. Um, Very important, as that again contributes to that sense of belonging, because if I would want somebody directly speaking to me, and that's what part of this conversation is about. Okay. Listening and pausing too. And I am a this is definitely something that I do, so I can say this is my vulnerability, where I will immediately kind of jump to something. But recently I have taken that time listening, thinking back, okay, processing the information, and then being able to thoughtfully respond to them, or give them whatever information that I have. Maybe I can help them, maybe I cannot, but at least taking that minute or so just to kind of reflect on what they are saying.
Yeah, and I'll add to this that. Oh, no, it's the next slide. I'm sorry. I was looking at the chat, and so I wanted to reach out, and I won't even try. So I'm going to ask you how you pronounce your Irish name. I'm sure it's no more difficult than Kelly is, but
It's Siobhan.
Siobhan.
Yes.
All right. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right. Yeah. So you can choose to share or not, but how did it make you feel when the PE teacher gave you a different name?
I'm almost 50 years old and I still remember it today, like it was yesterday. So it made quite an impact that, he struggled with it. And I struggle with names as well. So, as an adult, I kind of understand, but he really didn't make an effort. So my friend's name was Kelly. So he just said, I can't get your name, so you're going to be Kelly too. So like it took away like my identity in a way. And it did make a huge impact. So now most people know how to pronounce my name now. It's become a more popular name. So, but I'm still impressed every time I hear it and somebody can say it properly. And I always acknowledge that. Well, thank you for knowing how to say it. So,
Siobhan, thank you for sharing that. It's pretty powerful. Powerful example for sure. And I appreciate you sharing it with us. So I was jumping ahead because I had I'm juggling a couple different papers here. So, another way to cultivate belonging, identify your own bias. We all have implicit biases. I think we'd like to think we maybe don't have explicit biases, but we do all have implicit biases, and try to understand them, identify them. And Leader Factor uses the term remove them, which I changed to mitigate, because I'm not sure you can ever completely remove an implicit bias, but you can be made aware of it and understand it, and take action to try and lessen it in that. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Harvard University's implicit association tests, and if you're not, they're quick tests. I'm not quite sure how they work, but they have a number of different ones based on they might be gender or ethnicity or race or status or position and those sorts of things. And you can take these implicit association tests, and it just tells you kind of on a scale, where your biases may fall. I did this. This was part of a presentation I did last week for one of our service groups, and someone came up afterwards and said, "Oh, I'm getting together with friends tonight. We're going to do some of these implicit bias, implicit association tests." And I said, "Well, send me a quick email tomorrow. Let me know how it goes." And they did, and it was, I think they said 5 or 6 people, and everyone bought into it, except the 2 white males. And which I found telling. And I kind of replied back and I said, it's interesting to me that, they thought it wasn't accurate. And I just said, I hope they'll, reflect on it and maybe take another one, at some point, and just, give it another try. But it really is a reflective activity, and you have to be open-minded if you go about this, because it will identify. Sometimes it's just slight biases or wider biases as well. Nope.
I'm sorry, this just keeps happening to me. So sharing your story and learning theirs. So building that relationship and that rapport by sharing appropriate background. You don't know what you don't know, I guess. And just it's interesting to me, and I'm sure this has happened to some of you here as well. Making that connection to be like, I never knew that, about you, or um, in inviting them, oh, well, tell me a little bit about yours, and I do this a lot with, the cultural piece about others' backgrounds, where even though, maybe a different culture, just finding those meaningful connections, and then, having a great, rapport established after that, regarding, your shared experiences or your shared, background. But, encouraging, tell me a little bit more about that, which therefore, again, having that domino effect in a positive way, hopefully that would be inviting that, further sense of belonging. Okay. And check-ins, brief check-ins, again, like Bill was saying about his students, it doesn't have to be as far as, forms, maybe just having, a little quick conversation with people, or something like, turn it, if you're working directly with students, make it into a game of sorts, or an interactive kind of activity for them. But that's kind of still showing, again, with the surveys, it's kind of along the same lines, that get back to people in a timely manner. This is kind of showing, oh, this wasn't a one-time thing, this is going to keep going. So it's, again, going to continue to cultivate that, and strengthen that even further.
And then these are, as within stage 1, as I said, there's 36 some behaviors with short explanations and things like that. So these are just some more of them, and they leader factor has, follow through on small commitments, and I add it all. Because I think it's whether they're small or big commitments, it's important to follow through on any commitment that we may make to someone. And that includes, I'll get back to you in a couple days with an answer or with more information and that sort of thing. And at least for me, I had to write myself a note or put it in my calendar to make sure I got back. So I was very, very clear about those commitments that I made. Responding to messages promptly, and I don't mean right away, but promptly, whether they're emails or phone calls or that sort of thing. And determine the best time and place to meet. To me, wouldn't it be refreshing if we were able to have a PPT at a community location for a family, at a time that was convenient for them? I know there are roadblocks to that, but just think of how that might help the family feel more belonging and more part of a community if we kind of figured out what was most convenient for them instead of us just sending a meeting invite for a PPT and saying if you can't make it in person, then you can Zoom in, where technology might be an issue as well, and work schedules and all that sort of thing. So just looking for, are there better places and times to meet? Control nonverbal cues. So I do a whole presentation on communication styles, and we talk about we kind of dig into nonverbal communication as well. And those nonverbal cues that can either reinforce a message that we're sending or can derail a message that we're sending, and can either build trust or it can really harm trust. And it's more challenging to repair trust than it was to probably to build it in the first place. So just those, making sure it gets back to what Melissa shared as far as facing the person, right? If we're in a meeting and we have a translator, talk directly to the family. Let the translator do their job off to the side, but the conversation is still between, generally a school staff and a family. So there's also a lot of cultural nuances to nonverbal cues, and some really interesting things. So maintaining eye contact is a sign of respect in some cultures, and it's a sign of disrespect in others. Proximity, right? The amount of personal space that we have with people is different in cultures. And I encourage, people that in my presentation to just go out and Google it. Google nonverbal, communication cues for certain cultures, and you can find a lot of information. And start to think about how can I best be respectful of the person or the people that I'm speaking with. So really, you build a lot of psychological safety and feel included if you ask for feedback, you ask for contributions. For whatever reason, I've been around. It was a principal in 3 different districts, and in each district transferred schools at some point. So I felt like I was got to be an expert at moving, as being the new person in a new community, for sure. And I just remember teachers telling me, "You ask a lot of questions." I said, "Well, I don't know. I want to know how you do things, right? I'm not going to come in and tell you how to do things, and then we'll work on, growth and improvement and those sorts of things." So there's gratitude and appreciation go a long way. And then again, modeling and practicing these behaviors daily and all the time. So so here are some of the resources that I go to a lot. The video was my first jumping in the pool point, that it kind of encountered the topic through that video. And it was when I was searching for, organizations that have low turnover, high retention of employees, and have low attendance issues and things like that. So, and within that video, it talked about the book, The Fearless Organization, and has a little interview with Amy Edmondson. So that was kind of my jumping off point for this topic, and just kind of sent me, right after I was done watching the video, I ordered the book, and then kind of brought it to my group here at ACES, and presented it and say, is there anything here? It answered a lot of questions for me, and we decided to kind of move forward with the book study, and then continue with more specified learning opportunities around it. So I've done a number of text talks around psychological safety, and so we dig into a little bit more vulnerability. One article that that I've used is, a team is only as safe as the least safe person. So if you think about a team that's working together, and then there's when you say, you want to include others in decision makings, there's degrees of consultation, from I'm just going to tell you how it's going to be done to I don't know how it's done. Let's talk about it together. So there's just different degrees about that. So the Leader Factor website is there. And then there's this psych safety website, psychsafety.com is an organization in England. And there's a lot of, I think, valuable resources and trainings through that organization. And they also they send out a weekly newsletter. So you just have to give your email address, and every Friday morning I get a newsletter in my email, and it just helps remind me. It's usually different topics. A lot of it is business-based, business organization, but they do make connections to education. But a lot of the concepts and ideas are applicable to the work that we do as well, because it's all centered around the concept of psychological safety. So again, here was our guiding question. How do we cultivate a true sense of belonging for students and families? I can't speak for Melissa, but I'm no expert. I'm just have just kind of bought into this, and curious about how it can impact our communities, and especially our school communities, our students, our families, our staff members, to bring it to think about it. So just a quote from Maya Angelou: "I long, as does every human being, to be at home wherever I find myself." And with that, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We want to be mindful of your time, but also wanted to leave time for comments and questions that you might have. And we may or may not have the answer, but so.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. I could see how this all ties together. I know that we talked about, and I gave an example earlier, but how it relates to staff, right? Um, and how them supporting others, right? Their students, and how that all connects in both realms of feeling safe in your work, and then how that translates to how you make others feel safe as well, right? Your students being able to go to you and have those conversations, and give that opportunity to feel that way and feel like you belong. Um, just from a personal experience, um, I I know when growing up, and I know Shaban, my name is not the easiest of names to say, and it's said differently all the time. And I remember a teacher of mine, um, I went to a technical school, and he's like, I'm just gonna call you George, because that was the easiest thing for him. He was like, I'm just gonna call you George. Um, and I was just like, okay, because I'm so used to my name being said incorrectly that I was like, whatever. But I do remember, like, wow, you saying taking someone to take the time to, how do you say your name? Am I saying it correctly, right? Makes such a big difference. Um, so just pointing that out, like someone taking the time to just say, let me see, let me practice it, right? Even if it's difficult for me to say it, let me practice that, right? Because it's your name. And you get a great point that it's the most personal thing about you, your name, how you identify, right? So thank you for that.
Thanks, Jovi. Renee, you had a question or a comment?
I actually have both. So during one of the slides, I was taking some notes, and I think Bill hit on part of this, but I was also thinking on kind of the reciprocal side, right? So say you're at a planning and placement team meeting, and I've experienced it being with other families, and even in my own advocacy for my child, where the teams themselves, the teachers, the staff, whatever it is, um, could be feeling unsafe or not realizing why families might come in, as they say, coming in hot, right? They want data. They're demanding answers. They're, coming across seemingly aggressive. They're the way that they're presenting. And it led me to that initial question that you had up there, the I wonder why. I wonder why, they appear to be so elevated. I wonder why they're asking for all of this information. I wonder why, well, some of it can be past relationships, right? The last district I was in, the last school I was with, the last meeting I had, I was not part of the team. My child wasn't respected. I wasn't respected. Um, People were rolling their eyes at each other in the corner, right? You're talking about these nonverbal. I've seen it happen in my meetings, people checking their watch, sidebar conversations. So that's not creating a sense of belonging or feeling safe. So, I've witnessed, kind of different things, and I really love your question of the I wonder why. And then that kind of segues into my question of I'm curious to know how you're sharing the information, when you're doing trainings and with schools and districts or however it is. Is it administration? Is it at professional development? What does that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of this work has just been within ACEs. And the probably the reason for that is it's kind of been my own little personal, you know, I don't know what you even call it. I don't want to use the wrong words. So just my own interest in it. So so we started at kind of at the administrative level, but then those administrators who were really interested in it brought it to their groups and staffs. Sometimes they're either school or program leadership group. Um, and then um, and then so kind of then more broadly within our agency, just bringing it as people have learned more about it, and I'll present at their staff meetings. And sometimes I was just with our clinical services group last week. And so those are folks, mainly OTs and PTs, some speech language pathologists, some BT, behavior technicians and BCBAs that go out to districts and provide services in districts. So we started talking about this concept and how do they belong, what's their sense of belonging when they go out to schools and that sort of thing. So so I think it's do I see this opening up? This is an opportunity to start to open it up. We at ACEs and the other RESCs have a group of professional learning specialists that do professional learning out in districts and that sort of thing. So I see it maybe traveling there next and then hopefully expanding, and we'll see. It's a lot to me. It's a lot like it took restorative practices a little bit of a time to kind of take hold and gain some acceptance and some broad interest. So I'm just going to keep shouting it from I'm not even on a mountaintop. I'm just from my chair and my role as best I can. So I don't do a lot outside of the agency. I'm mainly focused on our own employees, but happy to share. If you and or your district or your organization might be interested in more information and just, having continued conversations, feel free to reach out, and we'll make a time just to get together and talk about how we can, share this information with others.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Siobhan?
Siobhan?
I just started to reflect on, first I'm seeing Kat's message in the chat, which I completely agree that, when students feel safe, accepted, and valued, they're more able to learn. I also, in my own stakeholder groups, am hearing from families that since COVID, they feel less connected to the school environment, to their kids' school. And therefore, there's this trickle down effect to the student as well. And I remember, and I'm a former teacher and administrator, so I remember having a lot more family-oriented things or parent volunteers or that kind of thing. And it does seem there is a shift to less parent involvement now since, and I don't know if it's because of COVID or what, I'm no longer in the school systems, but I'm hearing that kind of over and over again. And I think from a perspective of if you have the more involvement you can have, even with these talks that are amazing, and maybe just think about how we can get parents involved as well to be learning right alongside, the school team to make it more of it's a team, right? And then I think that's going to be beneficial for students. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's it reminds me of so another book that kind of got me down a different rabbit hole is The Anxious Generation, by Jonathan Haidt. And that talks about kind of the 2012 and the advent of the smartphone was a delineation for youth. And prior to that, they were play-based childhoods, and after that, they were phone-based childhoods. And there's a number of communities, and I know of two specifically that the the local government and the school system partner together to do a community-wide one book, one read on the book Anxious Generation. So I think there's starting to be, that need to try and, collaborate with our larger town or city community to bring these to parents and again, yeah, learn side by side and that sort of thing, share this information out. So I think about my years as a building administrator, and it's all about relationships. It's building relationships. And if you build up a relationship, and then you have a setback, it's easier to build it back up again, right? But you had some positive assets there, in order to do that. I used to give a few examples if we have time. I mean, I used to invite families in that were new to the district during the summer just for a tour of the building. And I might be in my shorts and a t-shirt, but they see me as a real person. And I remember one family, the parents asked, I think we might need to do it, 2 or 3 times because they're really anxious. And I don't know if the child was anxious or the parents were anxious. It didn't really matter. But over the course of the summer, had that family in a couple times. And just to help show them around, go play on the playground. I used to always invite our new kindergarten families, come and play on the playground during the summer, and that sort of thing. So always kind of doing that sort of work. And then just meeting, trying to meet parents where they are. I think I wish we were done talking about COVID. I know there's just long-lasting effects of it, and I recognize that. Just the fatigue and the anxiety and the stress and those sorts of things, and the need to kind of gear up, our growth, in many different areas. But ultimately it was, you know, one of the reasons I decided to come to ACES and not be in a building at that point. But one of my uh, most joyous experiences was during COVID. And it started with a not so joyous where we were, you know, I was kind of in conflict with my elementary principal colleagues about how to recognize our students that were moving up to the next school at the end of fourth grade in the spring of 2020. And we talked about drive-through graduations and that sort of thing. And I made a decision I was going to visit every house. And so over the course of 2 weeks, I did a sign up genius and you know went and visited every house. And we did it outside, you know, but it was probably one of the most important things that I think I did. And it started out just for me. Like it was selfish. I felt I needed to see the kids, those fourth graders before they went off on to fifth grade in a new school. But it became just an incredible experience, I think, all around. And you know, so I think again, you know, meeting people where they are and just, you know, just figuring out how do you build those relationships and how do you set the tone for, you know, for being part of a community. So, but yeah, I'd encourage you to, you know, reach out to Melissa or myself if you're interested in additional information. If you want to talk about, hey, can you bring this to some part of my organization or school or district or whatever it might be. You know, we can always talk about it. We can figure it out. You know, I don't do scheduling or billing or anything like that. I'm just kind of I'm not part of those groups, but you know, I'm happy to talk about it. So
So yeah, like Bill said, you can certainly reach out to us if you have any additional questions or feedback. You know, we're happy to connect with you on that. So we thank you so much for taking your time today to meet with us, and we hope that, you know, this was a good experience.